So the last video was all about the welfare implications of the market allocation for consumers, but we haven't talked about producers at all. So this video is going to be all about producer welfare. And many of the concepts that apply to consumers, there's a direct analog for producers, which is very similar. So in the last lecture, we established that consumers mainly make their buying decisions based on the price, and they do so based on how price relates to willingness to pay. And we have analogous concepts for the seller or producer. Producers still deal with price, but instead of willingness to pay, they deal with cost. And so their production decisions depend on how price relates to their cost. And remember, in economics, when we talk about cost or opportunity cost, what we mean is the value of everything a seller must give up to produce a good. And so the consumer, right, our little decision rule was that if willingness to pay was greater than price, then that means they buy. And for consumers, it's going to be if the price is greater than the cost, then they sell. And so we can do the same thing we did before. Let's do a quick example. We have a couple different sellers, seller 1, 2, and 3, with different costs for production. So we'll say $10, $20, and $35. And we can use this to derive the supply schedule. So if price is between $0 and $9, that price is not higher than anyone's cost. So no one wants to sell at those prices. From 10 to 19, seller 1 is interested in selling now. So we have 1. Then 20 to 34, seller 2 enters the market. And at 35 and up, we get all sellers who are willing to sell at that price. And just like with consumers, we can plot the supply schedule we derived to get the supply curve. So $0 up to 10, quantity supplied is 0, then 10 up to 20 is 1, we go 20 to 35 and 35 and up. And then connecting those gives us our supply curve. And just like the demand curve represented the consumer's willingness to pay, the supply curve represents the seller's cost or willingness to sell. So this is seller 1's cost, seller 2's cost, and seller 3's cost. And again, let's write it down to reiterate. The supply curve represents the cost for the marginal seller. And again, remember, the marginal seller is going to be the seller that would leave the market if the price increased anymore. And producers have a measure of welfare just like consumers, which is producer surplus. And the producer surplus is just the price minus the cost. So if we say that the price is 30, then everything below 30 is producer surplus down to the supply curve. So this is seller 1's producer surplus, and this is seller 2's producer surplus. And we can calculate this just by subtracting price from cost. So for seller 1, it's 30 minus 10, or 20. And for seller 2, it's 30 minus 20. So total producer surplus in this case is 30. So let's real quickly do an example where we have a nice continuous supply curve. Let's say the price is 30 again, which means all of this area is producer surplus. And again, we can calculate that using the area of a triangle formula. So 1/2 times the base, which is this distance. So 15 times the height, which is this distance. So producer surplus in this case is 75. And if we reduce the price to 20, then this area is now our producer surplus. And just like before, there's an area which represents the lost surplus due to sellers exiting the market. And there's an area which represents lost surplus due to existing sellers receiving a lower price for their product. So that is all there is to producer surplus. If you understood consumer surplus, then this is fairly straightforward